The story begins with an elderly man whose age has now reached an advanced stage. He currently lives in a retirement home, surrounded by other seniors like himself. Every morning, after finishing his breakfast, he walks toward a mysterious house built in the hills. No one really knows what he does there, and this secret adds to the mystery of his life. This man's name is Paul. As evening sets in, everyone in the retirement home is gathered together watching television. Suddenly, a movie plays, and it triggers old memories in Paul's mind. Tears fill his eyes, and he quietly leaves the room. Among the residents, Paul has a close friend named Alan. She notices his sorrow and gently asks about the past that still haunts him. Paul begins to share that 60 years ago, he worked as a prison guard. The prison was called the Green Mile, a place where inmates convicted of the most serious crimes were brought. These prisoners were sentenced to death within days, and executions were carried out using the electric chair. Paul has witnessed many prisoners take their final breath, but the year 1935 stands out as completely different for him. That year, Paul suffers from a painful illness, a severe infection that affects him deeply. Around the same time, a new prisoner arrives. His name is John Coffey. John is enormous in size, towering and intimidating at first glance. Yet when Paul tries to speak with him, he discovers that John is calm, gentle, and soft-spoken, unlike what one would expect from someone accused of such crimes. Paul works alongside 3 other guards, Brutus, Wild Bill, and Percy. Brutus and Wild Bill are decent men, but Percy is arrogant and cruel. Backed by the influence of a powerful politician in his family, Percy secures his position in the prison. He is filled with pride and often disobeys orders, mistreating prisoners without hesitation. Paul continues to interact with John, and during one conversation, John admits that he is terrified of the dark. He requests that the lights remain on at night, and the guards agree to his plea before locking him in his cell. Paul notices tears in John's eyes and realizes that he does not resemble an ordinary criminal at all. Later, as the guards discuss among themselves, one of them hands Paul the official record of John's crime. Paul spends hours reading it carefully. The report states that one morning, 2 young girls from a family went missing. Bloodstains led into the woods, and when the search party arrived, they found a large man holding the 2 girls while crying uncontrollably. In those times, racial prejudice was severe, and without listening to John's side, people immediately assumed he was guilty of killing the children. While Paul is still processing this information, the prison warden, Hal, comes to meet him. Hal is a kind-hearted man, but his life is filled with hardship. His wife, Melinda, suffers from a serious illness that causes unbearable pain in her head. Hal also informs Paul that a powerful figure from Percy's family is called, scolding them for being too harsh with Percy. He asks Paul to tolerate Percy for a little longer, since Percy is planning a transfer to a mental hospital soon, where the salary is higher. Although Percy could arrange the transfer in just one day, he chooses to stay. Paul suspects that Percy wants to witness one more execution up close before leaving the prison. Paul's painful urinary infection has now stolen his sleep, leaving him restless through the nights. The next day, we see the guards carrying out their usual duties inside the prison. Suddenly, they notice a strange little mouse wandering around. They try to chase it away, but it escapes. After a short while, the mouse returns, and this time Percy spots it. The moment he sees the creature, he tries to kill it. The mouse quickly runs into a room, and Percy angrily empties the entire room searching for it. Yet, he fails to catch it. The other guards then make Percy put everything back in its place. Soon after, one of the inmates named Alan is sentenced to death. Preparations begin for his execution, and Percy watches everything closely. Among the guards, Edward explains the process to Percy, describing how executions are carried out. A crucial step involves placing a wet sponge on the prisoner's head before the electric current is applied. Without this, the condemned would suffer unbearable agony. When the day arrives, Alan is seated on the iron chair, the wet sponge is placed, and the electricity is switched on. Within seconds, his life ends. Witnessing this, Percy approaches Paul and insists that if he is allowed to take charge of one execution, he will finally leave the prison and arrange his transfer. Meanwhile, Another inmate named Dell befriends the unusual mouse. He keeps it in his cell, cares for it, and even teaches it small tricks. Their bond grows strong, but Percy's eyes are already on the mouse. Around this time, Warden Hal calls Paul into his office. He informs him the new prisoner will arrive the next day, William Morton. This man has caused chaos in the city and is responsible for the death of a pregnant woman. Handling him will be extremely difficult. Hal then shares his personal grief. His wife has been diagnosed with a deep brain tumor, one so severe that surgery is impossible. Doctors have told him that she does not have much time left. The weight of this tragedy leaves Hal deeply troubled. On the other side, Paul continues to suffer from his infection, enduring unbearable pain that torments him, especially in the middle of the night. The next morning, after locking up the new prisoner, Paul decides to visit the doctor. The new inmate, William, pretends to be heavily intoxicated as they bring him into the prison. At that very moment, Paul is struck by intense pain from his illness. William, who has only been faking his drunken state, suddenly seizes the opportunity and attacks the guards. Chaos breaks out, but Brutus manages to strike William with his baton, finally regaining control of the situation. Once order is restored, everyone leaves, but Paul is forced to remain in the prison because of his condition. The pain overwhelms him, and he collapses onto the floor. Just then, John calls out to Paul, asking him to come closer. As Paul approaches, John suddenly grabs him tightly and holds on for several moments. Paul fears that John is trying to harm him, but instead, something extraordinary happens. Paul's pain begins to vanish completely. Before Paul can even process what is happening, John starts to cough and expel something from his mouth. Confused, Paul asks what John has just done. John simply replies that he was helping him, but now he feels exhausted. With those words, John falls asleep, leaving Paul with countless questions. Later, when Paul goes to the bathroom, he realizes that his illness has completely disappeared. The following day, determined to find answers, Paul takes sick leave and travels to John's village, where John lived before being imprisoned. There, Paul meets a man who knew John very well, since John had worked at his house for several days. The man tells Paul that although John may not appear dangerous and his actions may not seem threatening, one day he will surely reveal his true nature, because at the end of the day, he is still a criminal. The next day, Paul brings some cornbread to John, offering it as a gesture of gratitude for his help. John accepts it and kindly shares a portion with Dell and his beloved mouse. Meanwhile, William continues to torment the guards. Sometimes he spits on them. Other times he urinates to humiliate them. Frustrated, the guards soak him with water and lock him in a dark, cold room. Yet William refuses to change. The very next day, he tricks a janitor into giving him chocolate, chews it, and spits it directly onto Brutus. By now, the guards are completely fed up with William's behavior. In the midst of this, the guards decide to give Dell one final joy before his execution. They arrange a small show inside the prison, where Dell performs tricks with his mouse in front of the others. The next day, Dell is scheduled to face his death sentence. After the show, as Dell returns, William suddenly grabs Percy and frightens him so badly that Percy loses control and embarrasses himself. The day finally arrives when Dell is scheduled for his execution. In his heart, Dell worries deeply about what will happen to his beloved mouse, whom he has lovingly named Mr. Jingles, once he is gone. With no other option, the guards comfort him by telling a gentle lie, that they will take Mr. Jingles to a circus where he will perform tricks for people. Dell knows this is not true, yet he chooses to believe it, finding peace in the thought. Suddenly, the mouse slips out of Dell's cell, and Percy, filled with cruelty, stomps on it with a shoe. Everyone is furious, but they feel powerless to stop him. At that moment, John speaks up, asking them to bring the mouse to him. He believes he might be able to help. Just as he once healed Paul's illness, John performs the same mysterious act again. To everyone's astonishment, the mouse comes back to life and returns to Dell. Enraged, Brutus and Paul confront Percy. They threaten him, saying he will be put in charge of Dell's execution, but in return, he must arrange his transfer and leave the prison forever. Soon, the day of Dell's execution arrives. The weather is stormy and grim. Before leaving, Dell entrusts Mr. Jingles to John for a short while, then walks with the guards toward his fate. Percy is assigned as the officer in charge. As the execution begins, Percy deliberately neglects to wet the sponge that should be placed on Dell's head. No one notices the mistake until it is too late. The current surges, and Dell's body begins to burn. He writhes in unbearable agony. From his cell, John feels every ounce of Dell's suffering within himself, while William screams wildly like an animal. Percy's cruelty has turned the execution into a horrifying disaster. The stench fills the room, and the witnesses, horrified by what they see, flee in panic. In the end, Dell dies in terrible pain. Later, Warden Hal arrives to speak with the guards. They make it clear that Percy is entirely to blame for what happened. Afterward, Paul visits John, who is crying uncontrollably. John tells him that he felt every bit of Dell's torment inside his own body. Exhausted from grief, John cries himself to sleep, while Paul leaves with a heavy sadness weighing on his heart. A few days later, Warden Hal invites everyone to his home for dinner. During the gathering, Paul begins to wonder if John could heal his own illness and even bring the mouse back to life. Perhaps John could also help cure Hal's wife, Melinda. The thought is risky. John is accused of murder, and taking him to Melinda could be extremely dangerous. If they're caught, they could lose their jobs and even face prison themselves. Yet Paul believes John is innocent, convinced that God would never grant such miraculous powers to a killer. The guard decide to take the chance, but they agree that if John loses control even slightly, they will shoot him to stop him. They prepare their plan carefully. William is given a drink laced with a sedative so he cannot cause trouble, while Percy is tied up and locked inside a dark cell. Then they escort John out of his cell. At that moment, William suddenly wakes and grabs John's hand, frightening him. Paul quickly pulls William's hand away, and William collapses back into unconsciousness. The group takes John to Hal's house. Unfortunately, Hal wakes up and comes downstairs with a gun. They try to explain, and John quietly walks into Melinda's room. Soon, strange things begin to happen. The house shakes as John starts to heal her. He draws out her illness completely, but unlike before, nothing escapes from his mouth. Melinda recovers, and in gratitude, she gives John a locket. The guards then return John to the prison, but his health now appears worse, as though something is stuck in his throat. Hours later, the guards confront Percy in the dark cell, threatening that if he does not leave the prison, they will beat him and force him to resign. Percy agrees, and they bring him out. Suddenly, John grabs Percy by the neck and transfers the sickness he took from Melinda into Percy's body. Percy falls silent, unable to speak. Before anyone can react, Percy walks away, pulls out his gun, and fires 6 or 7 bullets into William, killing him instantly. The guards realize that John has deliberately passed the illness into Percy, causing him to destroy William. Paul goes to John and asks him directly. John tells Paul to hold his hand. The moment Paul touches John's hand, he sees the truth. William was the one responsible for the deaths of the 2 little girls. John had only been there trying to help them, but people mistook him for the killer and captured him. Witnessing this truth breaks Paul's heart, yet he feels powerless to change anything. Meanwhile, Percy develops a brain tumor, the same condition Melinda once suffered from, and he is admitted to the very hospital where he had planned to transfer. As days pass, the time for John's execution draws near, and Paul becomes increasingly anxious. He knows John is innocent, but proving it is impossible. With only one day left before John's death, Paul visits him and offers to risk his own career to help him escape. But John refuses. He says he no longer wishes to live in such a cruel world, burdened by the pain and cruelty of people. John asks for 2 final wishes: to eat cornbread baked by Paul's wife and to watch a movie. Paul and the others fulfill his request, showing him a film, the very same movie that, years later, triggers Paul's memories. Then the day arrives when John must face his execution. Everyone is filled with sorrow, but they have no other choice. John is seated on the iron chair, but he refuses to wear the mask, explaining that he is afraid of the dark. Like the others before him, John is executed, and tears stream down the eyes of everyone present. Paul's story ends here. His life becomes painfully lonely. He has no children, and his wife passed away years earlier. Paul takes Alan with him to an old house that once belonged to him. Inside, the mouse still lives, Mr. Jingles, who has survived all these years because John had shared a part of his miraculous gift with him. A few days later, Alan also passes away, leaving Paul completely alone, waiting for his own death. And that brings us to the end of this unforgettable journey through the Green Mile. A story that reminds us of compassion, injustice, and the mysterious power of faith. If this narration touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt movie explanations. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move the soul.